I have always believed that a mother's instinct is like a weather vane. It twitches before the storm long before the sky darkens. At 75, my instincts have grown sharper, not duller. Age thins the body but thickens the intuition, and on that particular morning, something in the back of my mind whispered that I needed to see my daughter. Not for any grand reason. Just because. The house felt too quiet when I woke. The ticking clock on the kitchen wall sounded louder than usual, each second pulsing in the empty spaces Harold used to fill with his grumbling morning rituals. He had left at dawn, allegedly, to meet old friends for a 2-day fishing trip. I didn't question it. After 50 years of marriage, habit becomes its own kind of trust. But as I stood there, kneading dough for Margaret's favorite apple cinnamon pie, I found myself pausing every few minutes, listening as though someone had called my name. No one had, of course. It was simply the echo of solitude. Margaret had been distant lately. Busy, she claimed, meetings, commitments. Life pulling her in a dozen directions. I tried not to take it personally, but a mother always feels the absence of a child more deeply than the child ever realizes. The pie finished baking, its warm scent drifting through the house like a memory of better days. Birthdays, holidays, laughter. I wrapped it carefully in a towel, as I used to when Margaret was a little girl, and I'd surprise her at school with warm treats on snowy days. She would squeal and run into my arms then. Those tiny moments feel like another lifetime now. I hesitated by the door, pie in hand. Should I call first? I murmured to myself. But something inside me protested. A soft, persistent tug. No, go. Now. So I stepped outside, locking the door gently behind me. The autumn air kissed my cheeks, crisp and alive, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant chimney smoke. The sky was painted with a pale ribbon of sunrise. I breathed it in, feeling strangely brave. The drive to Margaret's house was familiar. Tree-lined streets, quiet neighborhoods, memory-laden corners. I hummed softly, the pie warming my lap. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe this visit would be like old times. That she would open the door, surprised but smiling, and pull me in with the warmth only a daughter can give. "Oh, Mother, you shouldn't have," she would say. And I would reply, "Nonsense. A mother can always surprise her child." My heart softened at the thought. But when I turned into her driveway, all warmth drained from me. There, parked crookedly, boldly, unmistakably, was Harold's burgundy sedan. I blinked, convinced my eyes were playing tricks on me. But the car remained, silent and solid, its familiar dents and scratches reflecting the morning light. My grip on the pie tightened. He's supposed to be fishing. So why was he here? And why hadn't Margaret mentioned a visit? I sat there for a long moment, engine humming softly. Confusion turned to unease. The kind that settles in your bones, heavy and cold. Slowly, I unbuckled my seatbelt, my heart beating louder than the ticking clock had earlier. I stepped out of the car, the grass damp under my shoes. The pie felt suddenly heavy, absurdly heavy, as though it carried more than apples and cinnamon. Something foreboding, something waiting. The house was quiet, curtains drawn, morning stillness wrapped around it like a secret. I took a step toward the side path, and another. Each footfall whispered the same question: why is Harold here? As I moved closer to the window, the air seemed to thicken. I didn't know it then, but every step I took was leading me toward the moment that would change everything. A moment that would split my life into before and after. I only knew that something was wrong. Terribly, unmistakably wrong. And I was about to find out just how deep the wrongness went. The side path beside Margaret's house had always been a simple walkway, stepping stones Harold once helped lay. Stones I used to admire when Margaret bought this home years ago. But that morning, each stone felt like a judgment beneath my feet. Each step landing with a weight I didn't yet understand. I clutched the pie against my chest as if it could protect me, though the warmth had begun to fade. Maybe it sensed what I was walking into. Maybe my heart did too. The closer I moved, the more I heard, not voices at first, but the murmur of two people comfortable in their privacy. That intimate kind of ease that only forms between people who share secrets. My breath caught. I reached the tall living room window, its curtains drawn but imperfect. A narrow slit remained, a careless opening that should not have existed. Yet it did. Perhaps fate leaves small cracks for truth to slip through. At 75, I've learned courage doesn't come in grand moments. It comes in tiny ones. In the decision to lean forward, to look, to listen. I did. At first, only laughter floated through, soft, familiar, intertwined. Harold's laugh. And Margaret's. My stomach twisted. Why were they laughing together without even telling me they were meeting? Why here? Why now? I leaned closer, pressing my ear gently to the side of the window. Their voices grew clearer. "She won't suspect anything?" Harold said, his tone relaxed, almost proud. Margaret giggled. "My daughter, my baby girl." Her voice light as if they were discussing something harmless. "Of course she won't. Mother trusts you more than she trusts herself." I felt the first crack inside me. A thin, barely, their fracture. Harold continued. "All we have left is the final signature next week. Once that's done, everything shifts over without alarm. She'll think it's routine paperwork." Routine paperwork. I clutched the pie harder, my palms sweating beneath the towel. Margaret replied, "You really think she'll never figure it out?" "I mean all of it." There was a pause. A heavy one. Then Harold answered, "She's older now. She doesn't question things. She's slowing down." A chuckle. "It's almost too easy." Too easy." I closed my eyes briefly, fighting the sting that crept up my throat. My sight blurred when I opened them again. Inside, Margaret moved into view. She sat on the edge of the sofa, turned toward Harold. Her hand rested lightly on his knee. My breath vanished. My heart thudded painfully. Margaret asked softly, "And the accounts?" "All in motion," Harold said. "The transfers will finish by the end of the month. She won't notice a penny missing. And once the property sale goes through, we'll have the rest." "Property sale? What property?" My mind spun dizzy and slow. "My home. Our home. My home I tended for 50 years. My garden. My sanctuary." Margaret leaned closer to him. "Harold, are you sure she'll sign? You know she hates paperwork." "What if?" "She always signs what I put in front of her," he said with infuriating confidence. "Eleanor trusts me blindly. She won't read it. She never does." A sound escaped me, a small broken breath. I stepped back instinctively, hand trembling against my chest. But the worst was still to come. Margaret's tone softened, uncomfortably so. "You've taken care of everything. You always know how to handle her." Harold chuckled lowly. "And I'll keep doing so until the end." Until the end. My knees weakened. I leaned forward once more, not wanting to see, not wanting to hear, but unable to stop myself. Inside, Harold reached out and brushed a stray strand of hair from Margaret's cheek. His hand lingered. Her eyes closed, leaning into his touch. Then she whispered, "We're almost free." "Free? From me?" Harold cupped her chin and pressed a slow, familiar kiss to her lips. That was when the world tilted. The pie slipped from my arms. It didn't fall quickly. No, it dropped slowly, as if time itself pitied me. It hit the grass with a dull thud. Apples spilling out like the remnants of trust. I didn't pick it up. My breath shook, jagged and sharp. The morning air suddenly felt too thin. My vision blurred with tears I refused to let fall while they were watching. Though they weren't watching me. They didn't think I was close enough to ever discover them. They believed I was weak, blind, old. But in that moment, staring through that narrow slit in the curtain, watching my husband touch my daughter with affection he had long denied me, hearing my child conspire against me with the man I built a life with, something inside me hardened. The crack in my heart deepened into a break. I stepped back, then again, my shoes crunching softly on fallen leaves, though they never heard. They were too busy weaving their betrayal into plans for a future without me. I walked away, each step heavier, colder, quieter. And as I reached my car, tears finally escaped. Not loud, not frantic, but slow and silent, like rain beginning on a long, dry window pane. My world had changed in a single morning, and they had no idea I knew. Not yet. Not yet. I do not remember the drive home. Some moments in life carve themselves into your memory with painful clarity. The color of the curtains, the timbre of a voice, the shape of a betrayal. Other moments vanish, swallowed by shock. By the time I realized I had parked in my own driveway, my fingers were still curled as if holding the pie I had dropped. I walked inside numbly, closing the door behind me with the same gentleness I always used. A strange thought entered my mind. They never deserved my gentleness. I stood in the hallway for a long time, staring at the family photographs lining the wall. Harold and I on our wedding day, Margaret at 6 years old, toothless grin and messy pigtails. Our family Christmas photo, where Harold's hand rested proudly on my shoulder. I touched the glass frame covering that photo, my fingers trembling. How long had those smiles hidden secrets? I sat down at the kitchen table, the same table where Harold and I had shared thousands of meals, thousands of conversations, thousands of quiet evenings. Now it felt cold. Stale, like a relic of a life I no longer recognized. The betrayal didn't hit me all at once. It seeped in slowly, sinking into my bones. First came disbelief, then confusion, then pain, deep, sharp, humiliating pain. How long? How long had they planned this? How long had they been turning me into a fool? The silence in the house was deafening. I pressed my palms against my eyes, forcing myself not to cry again. I had already shed enough tears for people who had clearly chosen convenience over love. I don't know how long I sat there before I finally reached for the small wooden box beneath my hutch. It held every important document Harold had told me not to bother with. Too complicated for you, he used to say with a patronizing smile. You don't need to worry your pretty little head about finances. I had accepted it then, believing it was care, protection. Now I knew it was preparation. Preparation for the day he would steal everything I built. The box felt heavier than it should have, as if the truth itself was weighing it down. I spread its contents across the table. Papers, statements, contracts, old letters. My hands were slower than they used to be, my eyes requiring the help of my reading glasses. But determination sharpens the vision. Betrayal sharpens everything. With each document I read, my heart pounded harder. There, my name removed from the secondary savings account. There, a signature that seemed like mine, but slightly off. There, insurance forms altered without my knowledge. And there, notes written in Harold's handwriting, planning meetings with Margaret about transfers, sales, asset consolidation. I stared at the words until they blurred into black smudges. My husband, my daughter, together. Planning to take my home, my money, my life's work. Planning to leave me with nothing but my age and the naivety they mocked behind my back. I exhaled shakily, and when I spoke aloud, my voice sounded foreign. How dare they? It wasn't a question. It was a vow. The weight of the truth settled deeper, not crushing me, but rooting me. Anchoring me in a resolve I had not felt for years. Perhaps decades. The Eleanor I used to be. The young woman who raised a child alone while Harold traveled for work. The woman who patched clothes and stretched meals and comforted nightmares. She hadn't disappeared. She had only been sleeping. And now she was awake. I pushed the documents aside and stood, bracing myself on the table. I shuffled to the living room, pulled down another box. This one filled with old journals, receipts, letters Harold forgot existed. The picture grew clearer with every page I unturned. They thought age made me weak. They thought trust made me blind. They thought love made me powerless. But age had given me patience. Trust had given me history. Love, broken as it was, had given me clarity. The clock chimed 8 times before I realized hours had passed. The house had grown dim. Shadows stretching along the floor like fingers reaching for the truth scattered across my table. I made myself tea, though it tasted like nothing. My hands shook only slightly now, my heart steadier. I reflected on Margaret, the daughter I had carried, nursed, comforted, protected. The daughter I had defended even when she failed, even when she pulled away. The daughter I loved simply because she was mine. How could she? Was it greed? Was it Harold's influence? Was it something wrong inside her that I never saw? The questions coiled inside me, but the answers mattered less with each passing hour. What mattered was that she had made her choice. And now I would make mine. In that moment, I understood something essential. The truth hurts, yes, but it also frees. It freed me from illusions. It freed me from guilt. It freed me from the quiet prison of trust I had locked myself into for too many years. By the time the clock read midnight, I had sorted every paper into neat piles. Evidence. Proof. The story of their betrayal told in ink and signatures. I placed my trembling hand atop the stack and whispered to the stillness, "They will not take my life from me." The truth had broken me, but it also rebuilt me. And in the rebuilding I found steel. Morning arrived softly. Pale light creeping through the curtains, stretching across the stacks of papers covering my table. I hadn't slept a single minute. Age makes sleep precious, but betrayal makes it impossible. And, yet, I felt awake. Awake in a way I hadn't felt in years. The truth had broken something inside me. Yes, but in the hollow left behind, a steadier, colder resolve had grown. It felt almost comforting, like armor made from my own scars. The first step of my plan came easily. I gathered the papers, every forged signature, every unauthorized transfer, every whispered betrayal they thought I would never see, and placed them neatly into a single folder. My hands were no longer trembling. Then I called my lawyer. Not Harold's lawyer. Mine. A sharp-tongued woman named Louise who treated law the way a conductor treats an orchestra, with precision and absolute control. When I told her everything, her voice hardened. "Mrs. Whitmore," she said, "what your husband and daughter have done isn't just unethical. It's illegal. If you want justice, you will have it, justice." I let the words settle over me. Not revenge, justice, but perhaps justice. When served by a 75-year-old woman who has been underestimated for too long, is simply revenge dressed politely. We spent hours preparing. Fraud filings, reversal orders, account freezes, property protections, a personal protection clause, in case they tried cornering me by noon. My future was no longer in danger, but their future was. All that remained was the confrontation. Louise recommended a formal meeting, but I insisted on something else. A family lunch. A final tableau. Let them sit across from me believing they still controlled the narrative, just for a moment longer. Let them see the trap only when the door had already slammed shut. So I called them both, my voice steady. "I want to have lunch together," I said. "As a family?" Harold sounded cheerful. Margaret even more so. Guilt never touched their tone. They still thought I was blind. I arrived at the little cafe early and chose a table by the window where sunlight streamed warmly over the wood. I wanted light on my side for this. I wanted them to be unable to hide their faces. When they entered, they looked like any father and daughter sharing secrets. Harold's hand rested lightly on Margaret's arm. My stomach twisted, not with pain anymore, but with something closer to disgust. They sat, they smiled. And I, for the last time, pretended to be the woman they believed I was, small, naive, trusting. "How was the fishing trip?" I asked lightly. Harold blinked, then cleared his throat. "Ah, good." Productive, the usual. The lie sat between us like a stain. I reached into my bag and placed the thick folder on the table. The sound it made was soft, but to me, it echoed loudly. "What's that?" Margaret asked, her smile flickering. "Your future," I said. I opened the folder and gently spread the documents across the table, like a dealer laying cards in a game I now controlled. Harold's face drained of color. Margaret's eyes widened, her throat tightening visibly. "What? Where did you?" Harold began. "You left quite a trail," I said calmly. "Though I suppose you never thought I'd follow it." Margaret leaned forward, voice cracking. "Mother, this is a misunderstanding." I held up a hand. "Just one." She fell silent instantly. "No," I said. This is clarity. Neither spoke. Neither breathed loudly. You plotted to steal my money, my home, my life's work. I looked directly at Harold. You forged my signature. He swallowed hard. Then I turned to Margaret, my child, my once beloved girl. And you helped him. She broke then, tears filling her eyes, but I felt nothing. Not pity, not anger, just a hollow, quiet acceptance. You thought, I continued, that age makes a woman weak. But age has a way of teaching patience. And patience has allowed me to catch every lie. They sat frozen as I explained calmly, almost clinically. Their accounts were frozen. Their transfers reversed. The property sale halted. Fraud charges prepared. A restraining clause already in effect. Harold's voice cracked first. Eleanor, please, we can fix this. You can face the consequences, I said. Margaret reached toward me, desperate. Mother, please don't do this to me. I looked at her hand. Not with anger, but with the grief of someone who realized the worst betrayal hadn't come from a husband, but from the child she once rocked to sleep. I didn't do this to you, I whispered. You did this to yourself. I gathered the documents back into the folder, stood, and placed my purse on my arm. You have both already lost me, I said softly. Everything else, the law will take from you. Not I. For a moment, none of us moved. Then I turned and walked toward the door. No trembling, no hesitation, not even sorrow. Outside, the air was warm, the sun gentle. A breeze brushed my hair like an old friend placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. I felt lighter, free. Behind me, through the cafe window, I saw Harold sink into his seat, head in his hands. Margaret stared after me with an expression I couldn't decipher. Shock, guilt, fear, maybe all of them. But I didn't stop. I didn't look back. And for the first time in decades, I walked toward a life that was entirely mine. Sweet revenge isn't loud. It isn't cruel. It isn't fire and fury. Sweet revenge is quiet, precise, elegant. It is an old woman reclaiming everything she built, with dignity, with strength, and with the steady knowledge that she survived the people who tried to break her. And as I stepped into the sunlight that day, I realized something beautiful. They had tried to steal my future, but in doing so, they handed me my freedom.